Hello everybody and welcome back to your friendly and neighborhood Grim Dawn channel. I'm your host Winback, and today I'll be wrapping up this banana slug looking Blaster Master build for the Slugger. The Grim Tools link is in the description and the build is basically done, so if you have any comments, questions, anything you want, let me know and I'll do my best to answer them at this point, but it's pretty much all here. That said, it is a YouTube video, so feel free to like, comment, and subscribe your heart out while we talk about just how fun the build still is in the endgame. And I say still because there are honestly a couple of times late game builds really kind of lose their vigor, but this is not one of those builds. This video is going to focus primarily on gear since we're finally able to consistently farm those legendaries, but I'll give you a quick refresher on the devotions and the skills, and that should help fill in some gaps. If you're not into that, feel free to skip ahead like 2 minutes, take all of my disappointment along with you, you freeloading bucket of gerbils. I'm just kidding. Obviously, I would never, ever assume the shape of anyone's gerbil container. Now we'll start with the devotions. Our big two are going to be Azraka the Eternal Sands and Unknown Soldier. Next is Ulo, the Keeper of the Waters, which we picked up over Bull. So we no longer have Bull, we've got Ulo instead. Bard's Harp is going to share the tier as well as Ulzad, the Herald of Korvac. So those three are kind of the next tier down. Below those, though, we have Harvestman's Scythe, Targo's Hammer, Assassin's Blade, and Empty Throne. And then finally, just below that, we are rocking the Eel, the Lion, and a single point into the toes of the Crane constellation. Now, if you need a more in-depth look at the devotions, you can check out the previous videos, but for now, these are the optimal ones for what we are rocking. Next up is abilities, and Soldier is going to be our main class here. So as such, you'll want to put as many points into cadence, into deadly momentum, and fighting form as humanly possible. After that, put equal points into Markovian's Advantage and Zohan's Technique up to about 7 apiece, and these are going to account for some backup damage for you. Next is going to be Menhir's Will, which is pretty good, right about 7 points, just like the previous two. And then Oleron's Rage, you're going to want the full amount there. The next passive, though, is Field Command and Squad Tactics. You'll want more points into Squad Tactics, just because this one's increasing your attack speed, but ultimately you don't want to go too heavy, so right around 7, right around the middle point is going to be good. Lastly, spend a point or two into Fighting Spirit, Scars of Battle, Military Conditioning, and Decorated Soldier for resistances and physique bonuses. Now your Nightblade tree is much smaller for sure, but still pretty plentiful. You're going to have big points into Phantasmal Blades, so be sure to max that one, but first, max out Heartseeker. So put a couple points into Phantasmal Blades just to get it started, but Heartseeker is going to be the ability that lets your blades pierce targets, and that's really important for this build. After that, you can put a few points into Nether Edge if you want the crit damage, but that's not, 100% necessary, so don't feel like you have to. And then your Pneumatic Burst is up next. So go ahead and hit that 7-point sweet spot for Pneumatic Burst to give you the healing, and then put 1 or 2 points into Shadow Dance as well to get some dodge and deflect opportunities from that modifier. After that, you'll grab Blade Trap and Devouring Blades, 7 apiece for CC and defensive ability reduction, and then Phantasmal Armor is going to be worth a point or two if you can spare it, but the most important ability to ever put a single skill point into is going to be Blade Barrier. Blade Barrier is your Nightblade tree panic button and should never, ever, ever be forgotten. The fact that I forgot it up until this video is pretty dumb on my part because there are probably quite a few opportunities I could have used it to save my life. But Blade Barrier, again, panic button, super helpful. Play around that cooldown, don't need more than 1 point, it's just too good. Now, there's still a bunch of skill points in the world at large from quests that we haven't picked up, but once we get those, we're not going to put them into any new skills, so they'll just go into whatever skills seem the most important once I get them. Now, let's talk about gear, which is where this video should be focused. If you don't pay attention to anything up to this point, pay attention now. So the gear for this build is focused entirely around the gun known as the Slugger. The mythical Slugger is adding points to deadly momentum and fighting form for our soldier tree, and both are part of our cadence modifier ability tree, which is going to bump it up pretty heckin' hard. It doesn't give any points to cadence itself, which is a little bit of a bummer, but you know what? The other two are fantastic also. Now we do get increased flat piercing damage, we get increased crit damage, we get buffed piercing damage, and a huge chunk of offensive ability with attack speed from the mythical Slugger. Now, add to all of that a 15% chance to knock a target down and a 10% chance to reduce their damage, and you've got yourself a real-life hand cannon. Sir Slugs travels nowhere without his mighty weapon by his side. Now, I do want to mention that I had to deviate from the offhand build I was dreaming up in the first few videos because dual wielding for a ranged build like this is immensely helpful in the case that the number of attacks that we use drastically increases the number of chances that we have to knock down or to trigger any of our auto attack buffing passives from the soldier tree. Having two weapons also means that we typically proc cadence much faster as well, because the occasional double shot that we get from firing twice is going to... two bullets is two shots of the three that you need to proc cadence. That said, though, you can definitely have yourself two sluggers for increased sluggining stats, but I've opted to use a mythical Havoc as my secondary weapon instead, because Havoc is adding a huge amount of attack speed and physical damage to fighting spirit while converting about half of our piercing damage into physical as well. It's going to drop 3 points into deadly momentum, 2 into cadence, and gives us a little bit of lifesteal as well, as a treat. So these two weapons work really well together, and the only thing I can think of that would, possibly work better together would be two sluggers. So before you equip the two shooty boys, though, remember you are going to need one of a few different things to do that. So the first option is if you have opted to take the Inquisitor tree over the Nightblade tree, you can just pick up the passive in there that lets you shoot two guns, and that'll be just fine. But if you are like me and you're going to take on the Nightblade tree instead, you'll need some items to give you the ability to dual wield. So there are a couple different options for that. So the first one, the one that I've opted for, is something like a metal. The metal that I have is the mythical Pyroclasm mark. This metal doesn't really provide anything for our build other than some attack speed, though, so it's really just there for the dual ranged ability. You can opt for the Plunderer's Talisman as well, which is a relic, but that's buffing elemental damage, and it really isn't great by comparison to the metal that we're going to bring up in a little bit here for the build. Or, after all is said and done, you can find yourself a mythical Gunslinger's Jacket. You'll probably want this one above all the others because not only is it putting points into fighting form, but you're getting huge bumps to offensive ability, all damage, and total speed. The jacket is the best case gear, but don't worry if you can't find one right away. The relic is next up, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and it might take you some time to find, but I promise that it's worth it. So Azraka's Epoch is buffing all of your relevant damage, giving you lots of defensive and offensive ability, and finally giving you the little Sand Devil's passive. And then you heard me right, I promise. You get little dust tornadoes that eat bad guys, and they work so well with our shadow clones and our shiny little sand buggers. It's almost too good to be true with how much crap that this build can just fire off at any given moment. So for our rings, we currently have two pretty good ones, maybe not the best, but Belgothian Sigil is the first, putting points into Markovian's advantage and giving us a 15% chance on kill to get a big boost to speed and dodge chance. And then the ring, followed up by that one, is going to be the Obliterix, which is admittedly not the best for the slot, but is giving some really big bonuses to health. And I don't think I need to start pushing another symposium on why more health is good. Now, the fancy hat that we're sporting in this build is the Bounty Hunter's hat of the mythical variety, and this hat puts +1 into all soldier and Nightblade skills while pushing all of our damage types. This is just really a fantastic hat, and it comes with a really good passive that synergizes with Blade Trap really well. So if you have this hat, you get a passive called Hooked Net, and if someone hits you, they're going to have a net fire at them from your character that's going to root them in place and reduce their defensive ability. So it basically does exactly what Blade Trap does, except it only does it to one person, and it's got a bit of a cooldown. But all that being said, Blade Trap and Hooked Net do a very good job at keeping people away from you, making kiting easier, making living easier, making dealing damage easier. So there you go. It is a fantastic, fantastic hat. Now for shoulders, we have the mythical Amarostan Pauldrons, which give us cadence points, Blade Trap points, and more deflect chance. So the deflect chance is your ability to dodge projectiles, and that is super, super helpful because we got a lot of skills that are doing that, and we got some other gear that's buffing that stuff too. It's fantastic. After that, though, the gloves we've got on deck are going to be Mythical Turin's Grips, and these are going to increase your attack speed, physical damage, and put some points into Markovian's advantage. And then I'm not really positive if these are the best option, but I do have to say that these feel really, really good. When I picked them up and put them on the first time, I was just like, oh yes, oh that's the stuff, tickling right there, just like a glove should. But for boots, there is the mythical Rune Guard Greaves. These have the ever-elusive physical resistance, some big boy health stats, and they're going to add points to field command and blade barrier. On top of that, though, you do get a shield, and that's going to give you some shielding from Aether and Elemental damage, which is just spectacular. But these boots really, for providing nothing but defensive stats, are really, really good, and it feels exactly like what I wanted for the boots in this build. Lastly, we're going to talk about the belt, the chest, and the amulet, since the metal is, it's just out of necessity rather than any real purpose. But Mythical Shadowstalker's belt is more flat piercing, more dodge chance, and points into Oleron's Rage, as well as Shadow Dance. This belt is increasing your dodge chance on its own and buffing Shadow Dance to also increase its dodge chance. So really wicked cool stuff there. Really like this belt. Really, really strong option there. Our backup chest piece is going to be the mythical Zolhan's battle plate, since we can't find a gunslinger's jacket just yet. This item does feel a little bit common, so you might run into it pretty often, but whew boy, the points that it gives, the stats that it gives, are pretty freaking nuts. So both Markovians and Zolhans get 3 skill points, and that is crazy good. Considering that we only put in 7 points on each, these are pushing them really close to maxing out, and that's just good news for everybody. Then this armor is going to turn around and give you a 9% chance to deflect on top of that. So this comes in and further buffs your deflect chance, which as a ranged character is really important. So dodging those enemy projectiles is really important, because more often than not you should have the melee guys trapped and held very far away. But I think right now the build is sitting at something like 30 to 35% deflect chance, and that's nothing to sneeze at. So the 9% chance to deflect is going to help you dodge incoming projectiles from enemies, which is incredibly helpful when you are a projectile slinger yourself. My dodgeball flashbacks have absolutely nothing on this chest piece. Finally, the pièce de résistance is our amulet, the Will of the Blade. This little nugget is going to put on flat piercing damage, buff our crit damage, lay down some attack speed, put points into Oleron's Rage, put +1 into all other Nightblade abilities, and On top of all that, get another set of phantasmal blades to toss out with a 33% chance on critical attack to throw out the blades. So we already have some blades. We're going to be tossing some more blades. We're blade throwing. We've got blades every which way. The mythical version of this amulet pushes even further those stats, but I currently haven't been able to find it, so we're rocking the regular old Will of the Blade amulet. Now there are a bunch of components on this build too, but to be honest with you, the Grim Tools link is there. Go dig in if you really need to. The augments and the components are all built around giving me the resistances that I need to stay alive in Ultimate, and that is it. So you're welcome if you need them, but I guess the Seal of Might and the Seal of Blades, I think. Seal of Might and Seal of Blades are on both of my guns, so I think those are the two big, important offensive ones. But that is it for me, folks. That is everything. That is the Slug Knight, the Lord of the Slugs, the great architect of galactic sluggining. Sir Slugs is here to dispense justice to only the most heinous villains throughout the world. Let me know if you tried out the build in the comments below. Feel free to tell me if you got wrecked by any huge baddies that I haven't run into. But if I'm being perfectly honest with you, there hasn't been a whole lot of times I've been super worried to this point. We're just breaking into the end game though, so things are still fresh, and we're still finding all sorts of new stuff. So really, it's a pretty solid build, but there's always room for improvement. That's it for me though, everybody. Check out my other build video series if you haven't already, and I will catch you all next time. Peace out.